I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view.
Hi, I'm Tally and welcome back to Autism 30. Today on our podcast, we once again have another parent talk. It seems to be popular, so I've decided to do more episodes as these, and once again we have Kathy and Tina in studio with us this morning. How are you both?
Hi, well,
Good, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And I also wanted to remind our audience that if you're listening to us on iTunes, at the end of the podcast, don't forget to write a review just to let us know how we're doing. And thank you once again for sending in your fabulous questions for our podcast today. So I thought we'd just get going.
Sure.
Now, on a light note, and I thought this question was fabulous, what famous person with autism has inspired you? Tina, who has inspired you?
Well, I'm gonna steal up the most popular one and go with Temple Grandin, which I think many of your listeners will be familiar with.
Absolutely.
I don't know that you can have a child with autism and not know about Temple Grandin, but what I will say is that the reason I'm choosing her might be a little bit different than what you might expect. I mean, of course, I value that she's an advocate with autism, and I'll chat a bit about what I think she's given us. But one of the main reasons I really, really look up to her and am inspired by her is that she is a famous person who's very successful in her field, and she has autism. She doesn't have Asperger's. She doesn't have sort of high-functioning autism. She started off kind of where my daughter is. And I think in the media, they often portray the savants, the autism kids that have some sort of special skill.
Yes.
And it's hard for me to, I certainly feel inspired by those stories, but they don't connect with them as closely, and they don't inspire me as much in terms of thinking about my own daughter's future. But when I look at where Temple started and where she is now, I do find that very, very inspiring.
Absolutely.
Also for us, I mean, for me specifically, I have a daughter, I have a girl on the spectrum, and so there's not that many role models of women. And so for me, the fact that she had classic autism is very inspiring. And then, of course, the fact that she's such an advocate and gives us insight into the world of autism and how the autistic brain works and how we can help our kids. And I would like to say a little bit of a brag here. I ended up recently connecting with her, and she actually called me on the phone.
Oh my God, fantastic.
Yeah, it was when I saw the phone ring, and I saw that it was an American number and the state that it was from. My heart leapt, and I was able to speak with her. I think it was something like 20 minutes on the phone she spent with me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just awesome. And she was so kind and gracious, and she got right into it. She had a lot of very specific questions for me. Like, she'd ask me about my daughter, and then she gave me quite a few good anecdotes and just different advice about how to approach autism and how to push our kids. And it's interesting because, nothing was particularly different or new. If you've seen her TED Talks or read her books, it was very similar. Yes. But it's interesting, it ties in with her new book. She's got a new book out called The Loving Push. And I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but what I understand it's about is, pushing our kids and getting them to be more independent and gain skills so that they can be successful.
And for those of you listening, I will have that book available on the autism30.com webpage.
Oh, good. Yeah. So, quite frankly, from what I hear about that book, it all is exactly what Temple Grandin spoke to me about. But she was very gracious and very personable. And I felt so special to be able to speak with her and talk to her about my daughter and stuff. So, I couldn't help but feel inspired. And Temple Grandin, that's my answer.
And what else did she
have?
have?
Story.
It sounds fabulous, but what else did she have to say?
Well, one of her anecdotes was about she had just been to Alaska, and she was telling me that she met a young man with autism, and she said everyone else in the family knew how to work a snow machine. Of course, in Canada, we call it snowmobiles. Knew how to work a snow machine except for this young man. And she just absolutely felt that that was unacceptable. There was no reason that he shouldn't be able to learn as well.
Yes.
And she felt that that family needed to get out there to the ice and to give him practice. So maybe she said he needs to go to a lake where there's no barriers. It's a frozen lake and he can snow machine around and not hurt himself. And, he needs to get to the point where operating the controls becomes second nature to him, so that if down the road, if he's on a trail and there's a log in front of him, he doesn't need to think about the controls as well as how to problem solve getting away from the log. The operation of the vehicle will be more instinctive. And she said they need to set up barriers, like empty cardboard boxes that he can practice navigating around so he doesn't hurt himself. And just having that expectation that he will do what everyone else in the family will do. And
that was really well said also. If you think she also herself has autism, and I know that those of us who are working various therapies, often they'll ask us to break down a task into very specific tasks, divide them up to complete the larger tasks, and that's exactly what she herself is now giving you advice on.
And she's really doesn't think we should helicopter parent our children. So she says we need to push them and make them be more independent. And I guess that's the loving push. She didn't use that term when speaking to me, but when I saw the title of her book, I was like, oh, of course, that makes so much sense. And so, and everything I've seen her talk about TED Talks and everything, that's really her message. And so, and then we just talked about how things take longer, just like you said. So from my daughter, the 3-day potty training method was the 33-day method.
Yes.
And Temple's response to that was like, yes, now you've achieved that. What's the next thing? Move on to the next thing. You take your success and keep pushing. And so, and you're right. It's not someone who's neurotypical telling someone who's neuroatypical what to do.
Yes.
They are, it's coming from a voice of someone with autism saying this is what we should be doing. And I think that adds a little bit more credibility to it.
Absolutely. And I concur with you. I mean, Temple Grandin is a fabulous representative for our community, in my opinion, as well. And I love that advice that she gave you. Is there anything else? Sorry, I'm really wanting to learn.
No, you're trying to pick
everything.
my brain here. Yeah. Well, she had another anecdote about, she told me, and she said the name, and I don't know if it was a psychologist or a therapist, about how they had taken someone who was in an institution and they were older, like an adult, who couldn't dress themselves and couldn't take care of themselves, and had taken him out of the institution, taught him to dress, taught him the activities of daily living, and actually set him up as a barista of all things. And he made coffee at the local grocery store, the little co-op or whatever, and that's what he loved. And he felt he found purpose in that. He felt happy, and he was giving back to the community, and he was integrated. And she told me that even as he aged, when he became geriatric and had to move into a nursing home, he made the coffee in that nursing home. And so she was kind of, she didn't use those words, but talking about like the neuroplasticity, that it doesn't just end when kids are young. You can teach people with autism skills at any age, and finding something that's valuable for them and makes them really happy. And actually, I had a chance at that moment. I brought up the dancing barista, which if I think his name is like Sam Forbes or something like that.
Yes.
And if you haven't seen this story, there's a YouTube clip of him, and he's a young man with autism who works at Starbucks, and he dances and he uses the dancing to help regulate himself so he can be a barista and be successful. And the company's really supported him. And then they actually went on Ellen and he gave a very good interview. He was very well spoken to Ellen. And actually the boss that had hired him went on Ellen and explained, that these, all people, exceptional people, have the opportunity to give back and be integrated. And anyway, so I got to tell Temple Grandin, I said, like the dancing barista. And she's like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to look that up. So she talked. It's so funny when you hear someone and you see them speak. And I had seen her speak recently in a group setting and got to shake her hand and give my picture taken with her, but not have a long conversation. And then it's just so funny when you hear them, and it's just like what they sound in real life. Of course, they sound just like they do anywhere on TV, but it's just a real, like, I'm talking to the real person. It's like a real way that, especially if they have like an accent or a way of speaking. And Temple Grandin does have her own sort of cadence. And so, it was just like, I'm talking to Temple Grandin. It was a real gift to me. Yeah.
Oh, I think the stories you're relaying here on our podcast is a real gift to us, and I hope our listeners. And I also think that's a clear memory. Also, is of what Temple Grandin's saying. She's basically saying that neuroplasticity goes beyond what I know some people in our country currently are fighting about. It goes way beyond the age of 5 and 6, that it doesn't matter what age you are, that our children can learn and progress and be a true participating member of society, which I think is fabulous. What an amazing phone call that must have been.
I have to say, I mean, she was top of my list before, but once that she called me, she rocketed up my favorite people list. Yeah, that day I think she was ahead of my husband. I was like, it was really good.
And I can absolutely see why. Gosh, mine sounds so pale in comparison now.
Hit us. We want to know.
Well, I know a hobby of mine is since I was a child, is I'm a huge astrophysics and cosmologist freak, in the sense that I love studying astronomy, and I always have done. And I know that it absolutely amazed me to find out when I was reading about famous people with autism is that actually Albert Einstein had autism, in the sense that he couldn't speak until the age of 5, and he seemed to live the life that many of our children live, and yet still went on to produce fantastic theories that are in practice today, in the sense that he really contributed to a science that I truly, truly love. And not only that, I mean, throughout his life, you often hear of our children saying, oh, well, there's no empathy, and really common misconceptions which aren't true, that our children don't have the ability to feel what others feel. However, Einstein was also a vegetarian, and he really valued animals.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So he was a vegetarian himself, so that, I mean, he broke the myth of what a lot of people have a vision of autism as well. So he also had a strong moral fiber within him about what he felt was right. Even with some of his creations, he wished that he hadn't later on, considering the issues with the bomb. However, Einstein, to me, is really an inspiration, not only for having changed the way astronomers view science, but also with the way that he lived his life, and the whole point that he really made a contribution to society and had a strong moral compass in the way that he guided him. And once again, and I will reiterate this, I know we've mentioned this in another podcast, Albert Einstein had help as well. His wives helped him, his family helped him throughout his life, but look what can happen when people have help and people are supportive. They can make fantastic contributions to our lives.
That's very inspirational.
So that's mine. I mean, although I never got the chance to speak to him as you have yours, which I'm really
You're not that old.
Some days I feel it, but no, you're right. And what about you, Kathy?
Well, I'm going to go on a little different approach here. Those are great famous people, and I love what you had to say. People that have been inspirational for me personally aren't so famous. You may have heard, do you know Carly Fleshman? I believe is how you.
I think she's famous.
Yes, she is
well,
famous.
I think she should. She should be famous now for sure. My son is nonverbal, and I've often thought, just to get inside his head and see what is he really thinking. And his communication is limited because he uses some sign language and some pictures communication. But I'm sure there's so much more that he wants to share with us than he's able to. So it's so
I would
frustrating.
agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't honestly, I haven't learned as much about Carly as I would have liked to, just because of time.
Oh my God.
There's not enough time.
How many
There's
books
not
are there
enough
to
time.
read? How many
There's
shows
not
to
enough
watch?
time.
Yeah.
But I was so inspired by this teenage girl who was obviously very affected by her autism, and how when she was able to be taught how to type, and I believe she still does her blog with one finger typing,
Yes.
and I think it takes her a while, but she has some amazing things to share with the world. And she is a typical teenage girl, you know, basically inside a body that's trapping her to some degree. So this was such a beautiful way for her to be able to communicate and share. And I think that for me, it's about sharing what might be going on inside my son's mind too, and what one day he might be able to do. He has, I guess, like Carly's, motor planning difficulties too. But I am so keen on him learning to type, because I think that is, you know, I would love to be able to know what
there's
he
no
really
question.
wants to share with me. So she has been so inspirational. And another person is a young Japanese boy, 13 years old. I believe his name is, and I'm not going to pronounce it properly, Naoki Higashida.
Oh,
Something-
yes,
yes.
I've heard of him. Absolutely.
I know this book, yeah.
The Reason I Jump.
That's it.
The
Absolutely.
inner voice of a 13-year-old boy with autism. And I just found that, again, really interesting for the same reasons. Anyone that can give me, shed some light into, you know, how my son might be feeling and why he does the things he does.
Oh, there's no question. I remember, I think I
Absolutely.
bought 10 of that book and I passed it around to teachers at my son's school thinking, you've got to read this.
yeah.
I did that too.
Did you? Did you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I should have done that. I kept it to myself. Somebody else, she's a local girl, and she has a blog called Neuro Wonderful. Her name's Amethyst Shaver, and I've only seen her speak once, and again, for the same reasons. I think she's 24, so she's a little bit older, and she is probably Asperger's, I would think. But again, just such interesting information to be able to share with parents of what might be happening inside their children, whether they're able to speak or not speak, because I think so often, even when our kids can speak, they can't really necessarily voice
Yes.
all the things that they want to. So I've just found these three people very inspiring.
And it's not only that. I mean, as I said prior, I know I'm a major astronomy person. However, a lot has been mentioned about people that aren't able to communicate. And you said your son needs a device to be able to communicate. Now, somebody that I'm absolutely in awe of who doesn't have autism, yet he's not able to speak either, is Dr. Stephen Hawking's. Now, he's not able to speak unless he has a device. He's not able to physically move his body. Now, if he wasn't offered the help that he has, he would have never been able to write the groundbreaking books that he did, and so on. So I think it was reiterated here before that just because they don't have the physical ability to speak, it doesn't mean there isn't anything going on in the person's mind. And I think it's so lovely that you chose Carly and Naoki as two people who've had difficulty in being able to physically communicate, but it's clear to everyone that these
so
two
much
people
to
with
share.
autism have so much to share, and they clearly have. And I just want to remind our audience with these two books that were written, Carly's Voice and Naoki's
The Reason I Jump.
The Reason I Jump, I will make those books available on the autism30.com webpage. So if you want to order those books, go to autism30.com and click on this Parent Talk podcast, which I believe we're number 5 now. And those books will be clearly listed. So if you want to order them, they'll be available to you. And I think, you know, both of you have come up with really lovely choices.
Can I just interject for a second? I feel like we started with the most famous people, and we kind of went down the ladder to the, you know, eventually local people. And that just got me thinking, quite frankly, non-famous autistic people I know are very inspiring to me. So one of my our friends and therapist has a son, and he's young and teenager, and he had autism, has autism, but he's so inspiring. I look to him and I think, if only my daughter can get to where he is. He's going off to post-secondary. He's very personable. He's even babysat for us, and
Nice.
and
I
I
know
just
who you're talking about.
and I just feel like I just find that very inspiring at a really local
true.
level. And
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like he's tactile. I can just touch him and squish him and stuff, but it's like something right in front of you.
Yeah.
That's a daily reminder that success comes in all forms, but there's a lot of hope for our kids. And so it's nice that you got to meet Amethyst. I know I wasn't at that session that you were at, but
She's truly lovely. I agree.
yeah. But even just the day-to-day people that we've met, who are a little bit older than our kids, and you can see what skill set they've learned, and I find that really, really inspirational.
And you're absolutely right, because I know I'm biased, but I know I'm completely amazed by my own son. I think every day that he wakes up and goes to school and faces the challenges that he does,
Yeah.
when I think of my own life, I think of what he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and the way he approaches his life with dignity and hard work, and I just completely in awe of him as an individual. And his spelling is 10 times better than mine because I'm dyslexic, and he helps me.
Amazing.
I just want to say you're inspiring me right now because sometimes when days are really tough, it's easy to just, be upset with the autism or with the behaviors and everything. And you're inspiring me right now to remember that it's not that my daughter is misbehaving, which I know that, and I tell everyone that, but sometimes in the daily struggles you forget to remember that. So you're inspiring me to remember every day that it's as hard as it is for me, it's 10 times harder for her.
them.
Yeah.
And that's so nice of you to say, Tina. And I absolutely wholeheartedly believe strongly that all our children are really inspiring to us, which really brings me on to the following question. Has anyone recently given you any inspiring advice that you'd like to share in the final moments of the podcast?
Sure. Can I jump in?
Oh,
on this
absolutely,
one? Because
Kathy.
I actually wanted to jump in earlier. Tina, when you were talking about Temple Grandin and the new book, The Loving Push, and I didn't have the right opportunity to jump in, but I recently had an occupational therapist over working with my son, and she's fairly new to our team. And I won't get into the details, but she basically, I think she was over for a long time. It was a long visit. It was a wonderful visit. I stay with them the whole time so I can learn as well.
Which is really good advice for people out there.
Yeah, I like to. I find, and I can answer questions that she might have of my son that he's not able to answer himself. But I think the biggest piece of information I got from her was stand back and let him do it himself. He can do it. So kind of tying in with what Temple's new book is. So I'm really looking forward to reading that book. And it really is, as a parent, I tend to do things for him, for both my son and my
I think we all do.
We kind of jump in. It's easier sometimes to do it yourself. It's faster. It's less messy.
Yes, very true.
So I think that was a huge piece of a fantastic advice is he can do it. Just give him a chance to do it. He can do it himself. And I don't have to do everything.
And that's great advice.
Yeah. Now I just have to practice it.
I think what Tina was talking about earlier about helicopter parent, about what Temple Grandin said. I mean, it is difficult not to, and I agree.
We're all guilty of
And
it.
when they're young, you have to be a helicopter parent. So, a really close friend of mine, she started off as my mother's friend, and then now we share a bond of parenting special kids. And so I think I've kind of co-opted the friendship. But she's kind of in between ages of me and my mom. And she's actually the inspiring advice I wanted to share, but she also talked to me about helicopter parenting earlier in our journey, and talking about how, some parents just sit back with their very well behaved or introverted children, and they think, look, I've done such a great job at parenting. I'm clearly a success. Look how well behaved my child is. When really that was that child's, disposition anyway. And, the mother of boys will tell you sometimes those boys are just wild. And that if we want to be at the library, the only way to be successful is to helicopter when they're 3 years old and every book is going to go off the shelf, right? So there is a time and a place for that helicopter parenting. So sometimes, you don't want to be helicoptering your university kids like some parents are now, but it's a start off helicopter and then gradually de-helicopter yourself, I guess, right? And I think as parents of kids on the spectrum, we may have a hard time de-helicoptering because it involves sometimes trusting other people with our kids that, and trusting them out in the world, and maybe they can't communicate and it can be more scary. But starting with the basics, like, she can be potty trained, she can learn to put on her shoes, things like that. The inspiring advice I wanted to share, something this same friend has told me many, many times, which is sometimes when you're looking at the overall picture, things can seem stressful, but kind of going back to celebrating small successes, it's just, if it has been done, it can be done again. So sometimes, they've done something once and you're like, oh, was that luck? Or like, oh, they do it once and then they go back to not doing it again. And you think, oh, it's never going to happen again. But no, the peak of where they're at, or some success that they have, if they could do it, they'll probably do it again. And eventually in 2 years' time, that'll be their new baseline. And then they'll be doing something else occasionally that they couldn't do before. And so, whenever I see something that I didn't think I'd see, I just think, you know what, even if it's just going to happen once every month for now, it can be done again. And then I can think about what created that success, what environmental factors or support factors did I do that helped make that day successful, so I can try to recreate that and stuff. But it's a nice thing to think if you're down on something, like, oh, she did it once, I know she can do it again.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think both those pieces of information are really valuable for people to listen to, and mine pretty much sounds dull in comparison.
Oh, I'm sure it doesn't.
Well, I mean, in the sense that a piece of advice that I was given is sometimes don't be in therapy, just be. In the sense where sometimes, because of the fact that I want to try my best, I want to put my best foot forward, and I'm always trying every possible thing to form every moment of therapy for every second of the day. Sometimes you just need to be with your child and do nothing therapeutic, well, quote unquote, and just see what comes out of him. And that's a tidbit of information that I was given, and I can't say I'm completely successful at it yet, because I really there's a thing inside of me. There's a drive inside of me, but I am actively finding the point where I can just be with him and see what comes.
Yeah, I want to give you a secular amen there. I think that was pretty true, and I think, especially early in our journey, it was how can I make this swinging? How can I encourage eye contact? How can I make sure she's engaged? How can I reinforce the right behavior constantly? And I couldn't just go to the playground. I could not just go to the playground. And, I think a lot of that comes from a lot of the pressure that people feel in terms of, like, get the diagnosis early, get the therapy going early. There's stuff out there, that says if you're going to be in an ABA program, it needs to be 40 hours a week. And there's also this idea that you can't get enough therapy. And I think that puts too much pressure on parents. And I mean, someone once told me, just be the mom. And I just wanted to punch them, because at that time I couldn't just be the mom. I needed to set up groups and therapies and advocate. True.
And we're not advocating violence here.
No, that's true. But I will say that that there is a time and a place to just do what you can to shelve that instinct, so that you can just experience the joy that can come from just being. So I've heard that advice before too, but maybe I didn't maybe I forgot it. So thanks for reminding me. Yeah.
Oh God! Well, you're welcome, and thank you for reminding me of the fantastic advice you've given. Now, unfortunately, once again, we seem to have run out of time with another parent.
This has been a really inspiring one. I've really enjoyed this podcast.
I would concur.
Not that I haven't enjoyed the other ones, but I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed hearing your stories, and
I like how I feel right now.
I do too.
And I hope our podcast listeners do as well. Yes, I hope you found this as inspirational as we have today. And if you want to share your stories with us, if you want to write in and let me know your stories, I think that would be a fantastic one. And maybe I can even mention you or them on our next podcast. And if you once again want to do that, you can click on the autism30.com webpage, click on the word contact, which will bring you to an email page where you can email us all of your comments and stories and your inspirational thoughts for us to share. Once again, if you're listening to us on iTunes, don't forget to write a review and like us and join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And I can't believe time has already run out, but this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect